Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Todd Buonapane. I'm an equity member and an equity counselor, and I want to welcome you all to the Actors Equity in Memoriam gathering. We are here to honor the lives of our union siblings that have passed on. I will start by reading the code of conduct that is read before every official equity gathering. Actors Equity is committed to providing a respectful environment free of discrimination and harassment, regardless of an individual's race, religion, color, sex, age, national origin, sexual orientation, disability, gender identity or expression, ancestry, pregnancy, or any other characteristic prohibited by law. Because the union expects participants in its activities, events, and meetings to respect one another and to recognize and value individual differences, Actors Equity Association will not tolerate discriminatory, harassing, disrespectful, or otherwise unacceptable behavior at any of its activities, events, or meetings. It adopts the following code of conduct and expects those that participate in any of its activities, events, or meetings to abide by it. In addition to this code of conduct, Actors Equity Association has an anti-discrimination and anti-harassment policy and complaint procedure, which covers staff employees of the union. This code of conduct is not intended to replace or amend that staff policy. That is my tongue twister for the day. Along with the code of conduct, at these meetings, we like to set a tone of kindness. We are here to honor, celebrate, tell a fun anecdote, a fun story. We are joined by members, friends, and family members, and disparaging talk will simply not be tolerated. All right. So today, I want to point out that we have in our member portal, there is a page for submitting memories of members that have passed. So only so many people can attend these, but you can submit a little written eulogy for the people that you have loved. I was lucky enough to write one for Gavin Creel last year, and it meant a lot to me. And so if you go on the Equity website in the monthly In Memoriam post, there you'll see a button for submitting memories of members that have passed, and you can read memories that other people have submitted, and it's really lovely. Today, we will read the names of those reported to Equity, of those passings reported to Equity over 4 months. Today, you will hear the names of Equity members lost between December 1st, 2025 and March 31st, 2026. As a quick FYI, members and staff that have passed more recently have not been forgotten. Their names will be read at the next In Memoriam gathering. And often someone that has, say, passed in March is not reported till April. So we are reading the names of people that of when they were reported. I know there are people here today for someone that has passed in March, and I've asked one of our readers to indeed read that name. It may not be on the form in front of you, but if you are here to talk about someone that has passed, even if it's 5 years ago, if it's yesterday, everyone is free to talk and share. So there's no rules in that way. So we are going to start with the reading of the names. After the names are read, there will be time for people to talk and share. It is my pleasure to introduce the wonderful James A. Williams and Al Bandonis, who will be reading the names with me today. So we'll start with James.
December 2025. William Beckwith, Jim Brandeberry, Jean Bunge, Paul Casali, Irene Chapman, Barbara R. Copeland, Sylvia Daniel, Nicholas DeJoria, Lorraine Deman, John Dow, Penny Farmer, Anne Flowerfields, Kenneth Fuchs, Anthony Geary, Buzz Halliday, Stefani Hardy, Maxine Hillcoat, Richard Louis James, Willie Jones, Brian Kremen, Jerry Matthews, Mike McCluskey, Ken Makizuki, Michael Patrick O'Neill, Vincent O'Neill, Linda Radisi, Timothy J. Sandin, John M. Sankovich, Miles Gregory Savage, Brad Setzer, Sean C. Squire, John Starr, Richard Lewis Warren, Del Willard, Gar Wood. January 2026. Peter Anthony, June Barr, Alan J. Blocker, Maria Salario, James Clancy, Cynthia Klein, Pat Colgate, John W. Cunningham, Michael A. Delano, Carmen DeLavalade, Richard Dowell, Louise Egolf, John Fiorito, Francisco Garcia, Helen Geller, Jerry Griffin, Lorraine Montgomery, Nylan, Roger Oakes, John F. Rayner, Michael Reno, Esther Levy Richmond, Robert Rovin, Danny Segrin, Michael Sedgwick, Jillian Shaw, James Shaw, Brett Shuford, Imani Dia Smith, Caroline Thompson, Ted Tinling, Olga Tobin, Michael S. Trammell, Jerry B. Whidden, Isaiah Whitlock, John Wilmot, Melanie Winter, Max Zeller.
Thank you, James. Member losses in February 2026. Carlton S. Alsop, Guy Burrell, Kim Berenger, Sue Blue, Camilla Carr, Bud Court, Rosemarie Dana, Roni Dengel, Shelley Desai, Don Didowick, Robert Selden Duval, Laurent Gouraud, Robert C. Guy, John Herrera, Marilyn Hudgens, Diane Kagan, Jerry Kernian, Woody King Jr., Sandra G. Lee, Carol Lockwood, Joni McKenzie, Lamont McLemore, W. Thomas Newman, Tom Noonan, Tina Packer, David Schroeder, James Vanderbeek, Terrence Walsh, John Wheeler, Demond Wilson. And now Al Bandonis, please.
Thank you, Todd. Member losses March 2026. Foster James Billingsley, Jeremy Blanton, Steve Calzaretta, Louis Carbonneau, Jim Carney, Lawrence Chiappa, Matt Clark, Noel Conlon, Grant Cowan, Joel Craig, Amantha Damali, Gil Gerard, Edward Griffith, William Guild, Joyce Hanley, Cynthia Herman, Christina Kumi Kimball, David Klatt, Jane Lapatere, Michelle Lockhart, Elda Luisi, Bruce R. Mackey, Sean Marshall, Adrian Marta, Dan Mason, Mark McEwen, Erica Fitzmears, Constance Meng, Lonnie Merrill, Arthur McKellian, John F. O'Donohue, Joseph Ostapak, Corey Parker, Ginny Parker, Lyle Pearsons, Liz Polini, Ruth Ann Perry, Mario Piccirillo, Udana Power, Justin Rainsilber, Irene Robinson, Thomas M. Saltzman, Danielle Santos, Frank Schuler, Helen Siff, Josh D. Smith, Stuart Solomon, Edward L. Sostek, Marjorie Spilassi, Carol Stanzione, Paul Sulzman, Gary A. Tellis, Frank Vose, Don Wisted, Fred Williams, Susan Wisdom, Brian Soldesi, and 2 omissions from this list who passed in March, J.C. Hoyt. And someone who volunteered 3 terms as a counselor, 1 as AEA secretary, and 4 terms as our first vice president, Barbara Colton. Thank you.
Thank you so much, James and Al. May we all be lucky enough to have such distinguished people read our names. And I apologize in advance for any mispronunciations. I look forward to hopefully sitting in heaven and hearing my name completely butchered in one of these meetings. And that's okay with me. The effort is all that matters. We have 45 minutes left in our meeting. We will now open the meeting to individual remembrances, anecdotes, celebrations. I'm supposed to keep it to 2 minutes. I'm not going to set a timer. Just try not to go on forever. Everyone wants a chance to talk. And I want to remind you all to be kind, respectful. We want a positive tone. If you want to speak, raise your hand like Mr. Jonathan Brody has demonstrated. It's under the react button where that little heart is. You can see a way to raise your hand. And if you can't figure it out, just turn your camera on and wave at me. There's not that many of us. We don't need to be official. However we do it is how we do it. But we're going to start with Mr. Jonathan Brody. Hey, Jonathan.
Hi, Todd. Thank you so much.
Of course.
A few people I wanted to mention. First and foremost being John Cunningham, who I had the good fortune to do Titanic with on Broadway, and then later a concert version in 2014. And he was still up there doing it. It was amazing. He passed away at the age of 93. I did a little delving into his career, things that I didn't know about. But I love the fact that at the age of 27, he played Zoltan Karpathy and understudied Higgins in a My Fair Lady tour. I just thought that was really cool. He did 15 Broadway shows, at least, including Cabaret, Zorba, 1776, Company, California Suite, Sunday in the Park, 6 Degrees of Separation, Sisters Rosenzweig, Titanic, and Amour. And I mean, that it floors me enough that compilation of theater history, especially musical theater history, that his career encompassed. I just think it's fantastic. And he was, as I said, a very lovely man. During COVID, we had a Titanic virtual reunion, and he was there with his lovely wife, and so wonderful to see him. And he was just always so kind and wonderfully talented. So he will certainly be missed. I'd also like to say a word about John Herrera, who I also had the good fortune to work with in a show where he played a wolf and I played a coyote. And He was great fun. He was a huge personality, also a phenomenal voice and a wonderful actor. And he also had such a varied career. Um, Later, I'd run into him when I was working in San Diego, and he was on tour with the tour of Angels in America, covering Lewis and um, Roy Cohen, which that in itself was pretty impressive. So he was a
Wow.
great guy. Hadn't seen him in many years. He had moved out of New York many years ago, but he will also be missed. And lastly, I would just like to mention Marilyn Hudgens, who I didn't know well, but I did a tour of My Fair Lady with her, and she was also just a lovely, classy lady. Um, she played the who is it, the Princess of Romania or Hungary or wherever it is at the ball, and she understudied the older women, Mrs. Higgins and Mrs. Einsford Hild, and she was she was a gem. And I'm sorry that I didn't see her. I mean, I saw her a few times after we did that, but I hadn't seen her in a very long time. But she was a lovely woman. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. And feel free to drop your coyote pictures in the chat for everyone to see. I think we want to see that.
I don't
Um,
know if I have any on my computer, but perhaps at a later date I can at
my
least
DMs are open, Jonathan.
there we go.
Katrina.
Yes, hi everyone. It's interesting that I would come to this today. Unfortunately, I'm here because my husband, J.C. Hoyt, passed away in March. He was 2 hours shy of his 82nd birthday. He was my partner for 28 years, and we were married for 12 of those. We met on a European tour of A Christmas Carol, and I did that tour for several years, and he did as well. But he was a journeyman actor. He was a graduate of the University of Minnesota. He grew up in St. Paul. He started out on the dinner theater circuit back in the day. He got his equity card at Chanhassen Dinner Theater. In fact, we went to the 50th anniversary of that back in 2018, which was absolutely fabulous. The Chanhassen Dinner Theater out there in the middle of all the malls now, when it used to be out there in the cornfields, apparently. And he got his equity card in How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. So he went on to be a company member at New Jersey Shakespeare Festival for about 10 years, and he also did a lot of other regional work wherever he was paid to go on his equity contracts. So it was unfortunate that he passed away. He was semi-retired already, and of course I miss him greatly. Then I come to this meeting and I see that there are two other dear people on the list. Nicholas DeJoria, who was a dear, dear friend of my husband's, and he was also a graduate of the University of Minnesota. Nicky lived in the Bronx now, and he worked with Joe Papp back in the day. He was in the Broadway revival of, what is it? Arturo Ui, I think, in 1969. And he was just a delightful man and a dear, dear friend of my husband's. And we had attended his funeral recently, but Nick had just a generosity of spirit that I always appreciated. And Willie Jones is an actor that I know from Bennington, Vermont. That was his hometown, and he was a company member at Oldcastle Theater in Bennington for many, many years. And he was a school teacher as well in the area, and he always donated his equity salary back to the theater. I remember people saying that about Willie Jones. So I'm glad to be here to celebrate those three beautiful people, and especially my husband. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Katrina. I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you for speaking. Stephen.
Hello, everyone. I want to thank Al for mentioning Barbara Colton, considering that she died after these lists were read. Um, As Al said, Barbara was the first vice president of Actors Equity for 12 years, from 1976 to 1988. She also was the vice president of the AFL-CIO from 1976 to 1982. My fondest memory with Barbara is visiting her in her office at the Equity Building, and she taught me everything I know about the business. No one ever teaches you about the business, but Barbara did. One of her probably biggest accomplishments at Equity, and the one that she was so proud of, was the TYA contract. And she spent 8 years organizing and getting Equity to agree to negotiate a contract with the TYA producers. At the time, the contract was called the National Children's Theater Contract, and it was ratified by council in June of 1969. There was quite a struggle, as Barbara would tell the story, of getting council to agree, getting the executives to agree to even consider negotiating a contract. And along the way, she heard so many times, "Why are you spinning your wheels? Why are you going through all this? It's just kiddie theater." But she never looked at it that way. She looked at it as work weeks and jobs for actors. So she was very passionate about it. In 1975, she was still the chief negotiator for the contract, and she got Charlie Hull from TheaterWorks USA, who was the negotiator for the producer side, to agree to change the name to the Theater for Young Audience contract, which is how we know it today. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephen. Arnold.
Thanks so much, Todd. And thank you, Todd and Al and James. This is so beautiful. I'm Arnold Mangioli. I'm actually a casting director. I'm a CSA member, not an Equity member. But I contacted Equity about Barbara Colton when she died, and they said they would be doing a tribute to her in the June newsletter. David Levy suggested that I could come on here because it's an open tribute and just speak briefly about her. So I just would add to what Stephen said that Barbara was a good friend of mine, but also was an extraordinary force in labor, and particularly for Actors Equity. Stephen mentioned the TYA contract. Well, anyone who's ever worked in a TYA contract, or any of those who got to cast TYA contracts, those jobs are all because of Barbara's fight. And the last measurement was $4 million in salary to Equity members on TYA contracts since she made that battle and fought for it. She also was a giant force in the Showcase Code, which was highly controversial at the time it came out. So much so, some of you may remember back in the day, there were backers auditions where all the Equity members would work for free, and then the producer would go cast whoever they wanted, and nobody got anything. Including the casting director. But Barbara fought for the Showcase Code as a way to allow actors to have participation, subsidiary rights in those sorts of presentations. And that was $250,000 in subsidiary rights to Equity members at last count, which was some years ago. I'm just going to put in the chat for anybody who would like to know more about her. Pardon me, sounds of New York City in the outside. I wrote a blog post about Barbara and her accomplishments, as well as our relationship and the extraordinary friendship we had. And in that blog post is a link to her personal website, where she talks in great detail about all of her Equity accomplishments and has incredible photos, incredible letters. One of the things that strikes me most in all of that is the uh, when the showcase code was so controversial, it led to a bit of an uprising. Equity members were furious, and Barbara, as first vice president, led the meeting that was held at the Majestic Theater on one day in August years ago. And she had to be the leader of that meeting with all of the producers and all the equity members present. It was standing room only capacity. And on her website, there are letters from so many equity members and so many producers thanking her and saying that it is because of her extraordinary negotiating capability and level-headedness that the Showcase Code came to be. So it's really worth taking a look at because it's one of those things that it's one of the people whose shoulders we all stand on. That it was a long time ago. It was back in the last century, the bulk of her work and what she was fighting for. And it was extraordinary. And it's good to remember. I really think that equity ought to consider. I have no idea how to do this, but I'm hoping, Albandonis, you will, to consider naming something after her, something in the equity building or some equity policy or something, because it is well deserved. So I just wanted to come here and share that, and I'm thrilled to be on here and listening to all of you. There's so many names I know and recognize, and I'm enjoying seeing you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnold. I appreciate that. I can't wait to dive into this. Thank you for sharing that link with us. Um, and I've played two dogs and a cow. I've done a whole lot of children's theater in my career, so I'm really grateful that I got to do it on an equity contract. Nancy Daly. Hi, friend.
Hey, my darling. Um, I have three people that I have to talk to about today, and I'm so honored to be able to do that. And forgive me, guys, I'm just going to be a mess. Gary Tells. Gary was one of a beloved member of the Washington, D.C. theater community, and was he was a rock. He was always the rock of every cast, the one that you could count on. And he smoldered. He was like Al. He smoldered. You would look at him and forget what you were saying. You were like, ah, la, 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 la. But he's a very, very talented, gifted actor and just a range as wide as Wyoming. And to have him be gone is almost impossible to imagine. But I'm speaking on behalf of the Washington D.C. theater community. We all loved him dearly. Working with him was a joy. Jerry Kernian is an amazing actor who I met in LA. He also worked in New York. I was married to him in many 5-minute commercial auditions. We would have those quick 5-minute marriages, like, oh, this is my husband. He was like the dream acting partner of all time. He was like an everyman. He just, every time he showed up, he was on target, he was focused, and he had brought so much heart and understanding to every role he played. And there were many. He was a good man and a wonderful friend. And he was the one that if you ran into an audition, he'd seen you do a show. I saw you in so and so. I saw you in that. And we all know in this business, sadly, not often do people cheer for your victories. It never makes sense to me. But he always did. He always did. And then, oh God, I'm sorry.
Don't you be sorry. Don't you be sorry. That's what this is for.
Jerry Whidden. For anybody who has worked in the Washington, D.C. area, Jerry Whidden was the beloved artistic director of the Roundhouse Theater for many, many years. I met him when he was an actor way back, in the dark ages. And over time, he started doing more directing. And he was even just auditioning for him. You walked out and felt that if that's all I get to do, a part of this role for this like 5-10 minutes, I'm good. He was that kind of a director. You could just be so open. It was like flying. It was like, I see Dee, she's smiling. She knows what I'm saying. He was that kind of a director, had a beautiful family, was very, very beloved by the DC theater community, and my friends on council will understand how much this hurts me. He died from the effects of Alzheimer's. I, for those of you who don't know me, I lead teams around the country for the Walk to End Alzheimer's, which is sponsored by the Alzheimer's Association. And every time someone that is beloved to me dies from this, it's like it is such a stab in the heart that we haven't found a cure yet and we could keep them here. So, on behalf of the Washington, D.C. theater community, I am so grateful to have you all get a glimpse of who he is. I'm going to make sure that I have people who have worked with him send in a letter to Equity. You all, everybody on the council, I'll make sure that they do that so more people can get to know this wonder of a man. He was a visionary, and I am forever grateful that I knew all of them. They're my guardian angels. I have a premiere tonight, and I can just imagine they're up there going, "Oh, you go, girl. That's our girl." So they're wonderful, wonderful gentlemen, and thank you all for letting me share about them. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Aura.
Hi, I apologize for being off camera today, but
No worries at all.
if you could see me the way that I see me, you'd be off camera too. I first of all, I don't know most of you, and it is very heartwarming to me to hear wonderful things being said. And you're absolutely right, Miss Nancy, about being able to cheer people on in their victories and how important that is. Some of my closest friends are very much that way, even if they're not working, even if they haven't worked in a while. They are still, as we all are with one another, which is why we are so close. We cheer each other on for everything. I live in Chicago, and I will tell you that those people were the ones who, when I first got here, in an ocean of "you're never going to find work, you're not from here, you didn't go to the schools here," so forth and so on. These were the people who would call and say, "Hey, did you hear about that audition?" And would give me information to just go and do these things. And I'm just so grateful that you mentioned that, because it is very important for our community. I wanted to mention something very quickly about Dawn Didowick. I did not know her very well, but I wanted to talk about how I saw her through the eyes of her husband, Harry Groner. We met in Chicago doing The Madness of George III, and we were Mr. and Mrs. George. And uh, I I didn't know him as well as other people did at the time, and he's an old song and dance dude. He had television series. He was the mayor of Buffytown and all the rest of that. And I thought, oh, golly gee, Mr. Hollywood, and he would talk about his wife, and I very incorrectly assumed that it would be somebody, you know, decades younger who trophy wife kind of whatever, because he himself was so lively and so wonderful to be with that I guess that was my assumption, and I'm very sorry that I made that, because when I met Dawn, she was about half his height, and she was they'd been together forever, and she is the definition of Spitfire. And being able to see her through his eyes, as in how he would look at her when she would speak, and how he just would gush over everything that she said. And whenever you walked into his dressing room, on his mirror, from top to bottom, all the way around, barely any space to see your face, were notes and postcards and photos and trinkets and all kinds of memorabilia that were all about his wife. It was all about Dawn from the time they met. Everything that he held dear about her. Like I said, you could barely see the mirror itself, and his mirrors were always like that. And it just made me so very happy to see someone love someone else as much as he loved his wife. And that's always my favorite memory whenever I think of her. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aura. Dee Hody. Hi, Dee.
Hello, my friends, all of you. Aura, thank you so much for those words about Dawn Didowick. I knew her as a very young actress. We were both young then, and I knew Harry because of Dawn. My former husband and I used to have a Christmas party every year, and they would come and just fill the room with joy. It was the holidays, so we were always happy. But as an actress, Dawn was so remarkable. She could, as an actor, I'm always so envious of someone who can look at a script or a word or a poem or something and do something with it that never occurred to me. And it's so successful and so right. And I'm so envious Dawn was that person. I was just like, God, I'd love to crawl up inside her brain sometime and just spend a day or two. But funny and charming and self-effacing, and Harry adored her. I spoke with him not long ago when I discovered she had passed, and what a guy. Harry's salt of the earth, and was so measured about the sadness, but almost the relief of her passing. And with all respect, I say that because I know he meant that, because he loves her and he misses her terribly. So, Aura, thank you so much for remembering her. I had wanted very much to speak about Dawn. I did a show with Harry up at the Dennis Playhouse on the Cape years ago, one of those silly farces that you do for 2 weeks in the summer that make the audiences wet their pants and you can hardly keep a straight face in. We laughed all the time. It was all I could do. Sometimes I pretended I was weeping so that I could cry. I'd laugh on stage. It was just too much fun. And we had a glorious time together, and I will always have a fond place for them. So the other people that I wanted to mention, I was a fan of John Cunningham's. I was a fan of Jane Lapierre's. I did not know them personally. I worked with Sandra Lee, who was the original Tiger Lily in Peter Pan, and Minnie Fay, I believe, in Hello Dolly. She was much advanced in age at the time we did this show off Broadway. There were 50 people in it. It was called The Audience, and the show was about the people sitting in the audience. So it was little vignettes of people looking for their program or calling a babysitter. And anyhow, she sat down in front with Rita Gardner, another great who has left us, who I also worked with years ago, and it was just hilarious. She was this big. Sandra Lee was a peanut, and but she was, man, she was on her game. She was really, really funny, and sometimes a little unruly in an unruly way, but she knew what she was doing. So we had I have a fond memory of her for that. So, I did not know Barbara Colton. I only know of her legacy, so I too am grateful to have that information to do some homework on. But it's great to see all of you, and it's great to share any of these memories with all of you. And thank you so much for doing this, Todd and all. And I wish you all a good day. Thanks.
You, Dee. I'm so happy you said something about Sandra Lee because I never met her, but as a little musical theater young queer kid studying his liner notes, I'm like, I know that name.
Geek out,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, he's such a geek. Yeah. Al Bandonas, talk to us.
All right. First, I want to thank everyone for being here, and Javon and Todd and James for reading these names regularly. I'm thrilled to be part of it today as a reader. But it was said about celebrating these people. All these people we could celebrate and talk and tell stories about all day. But there are four that I do want to say something quick about. One, again, Barbara Colton. There are people on this call who have been counselors, are counselors, are maybe going to continue to be counselors. Volunteering takes a lot of time. And I've learned personally, as you go up the ranks of the hierarchy, takes even more and more time. The fact that Barbara Colton devoted so much of her time in service to her fellow members is that alone is an incredible feat. But you've heard some of the things that have come out of it. I mean, but making sure that in these showcase codes where we could be abused, where actors and stage managers could be abused, she made sure we weren't. And Arnold, it's still controversial, but she has set up these parameters to make sure we weren't. She has ensured that we have stage managers on various contracts. They say that the simple act of joining a union is a political step, but equity is getting more involved in politics. And Barbara Colton kind of led that. I mean, the desegregating of theaters, and she led marches down south after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Really bringing equity into that age. She was appointed by Jimmy Carter as an advisor to the NEA. I mean, this woman truly was a powerhouse. But there are other members on this list. Anthony Geary. I mean, Tony Geary. I mean, many of us remember him. Luke. It's Luke and Laura. Now, that's an example of somebody who has achieved tremendous success in a sibling union, but maintained their membership to our association. I've never forgotten him. A very sad young loss, Brett Shuford. I embrace our required auditions, equity chorus calls, EPAs. In our industry, they're the water cooler moment. They're where we can all gather together, and it's not about doing the job, but that's where our community starts. And I met Brett when I was an older actor, and he was just starting out, and I would see him time and time again at these auditions, and then he got his first Broadway show, Mary Poppins. But a very, very sad young passing. And another person I've worked with, Frank Vose. I believe it was my second equity contract on Anything Goes. I was Billy Crocker. He was Moonface Martin. And however you think Moonface should be, Frank Vose was it. But if you're ever in a jam, here I am. I loved Frank. All right, Todd, back to you.
Thank you, Al. Thank you for saying Brett Shuford, who is kind of my generation of people coming to New York City. And I was looking up his credits on IMDb because he was in like 6 Broadway shows. And I was like, oh, there are so many other Broadway shows there. And he and I did the On the 20th Century Actors Fund benefit together. And he did about 5 of those, donating his time to raise money for what is now the Entertainment Community Fund. And I think he always showed up. He died of lymphoma at 46, way too young. His husband, and he has a child, and it happened very quickly, and it was all very sad. But I am happy that we get to honor him today. So thank you for bringing him up. Katrina.
Yes, hi everybody again. I know I was very early, and if nobody else is going to speak, I just wanted to add a couple of little things about my husband, J.C. Hoyt, and because it's so interesting hearing people's contributions to the union. And it's been an education for me in that respect to be here. But one of the things that he did, which I really loved when I found out about it, he was a character actor. So he always had like wigs and glasses. I mean, and he would often buy the wigs or whatever after if they were made specially for him, back in the day. But so he worked with, I don't remember who the woman, the person at Equity was, but on putting together that costume rental list that is it used to be in the SBT handbook and a couple of the others. Am I frozen? No, okay, sorry. And a couple of the others, but that was because as a character actor, he was always finding, that he would be like, oh, well, I have those funny glasses that you're looking for or something, So even though it was always just like a nominal amount of money, if it was a longer run, you could make some money on renting your stuff to theaters. So that was really something a small contribution that he made to those contracts. But he also was always the deputy if there was an opportunity to do that. And he sat on the developing theater committee for many years too, and even just up into the pandemic. And he was the old actor. If anybody is familiar with the Fantastics, he did about 5 different productions of that show, and he was the a standby in New York for the old actor and the girl's father when it was down at the Sullivan Street Playhouse. And then he went into the production for the final year as the old actor. But I saw that show many times, and I saw him in two other productions of it, and I never stopped laughing every time he jumped out of that box. Sir, the players have arrived. I mean, I saw it, I must have seen it 100 times, but I just found it really, really fun. And he was a staple in the New Jersey theater scene out here, and it was over the course of his career throughout the country, he did 34 of the Shakespeare plays. And one time I said to him, oh, somebody's doing a production of Hamlet. You know, there's an audition coming up. He said, I've done 5 productions of Hamlet. So I don't think he went to that audition. But anyway, that was just my additional contributions to my husband's contribution to equity. He loved the union. He was a staunch supporter of the union. And I know he would be really pleased that we were here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Katrina. Iris.
Hello, everyone. I'm not turning on my camera because I was at the dentist all morning and I have a fat lip. You should see the other guy. He looks great, the dentist. I wanted to say a word about 2 Chicago actors on the list. Guy Burrill, who I've known since I was 17 doing children's plays together. He was a fine actor and a wonderful director. And many, many years ago, Jim Jacobs and Warren Casey came to him with 5 songs and some sketches and said, could we do a play like this? And he shaped it and molded it and turned it into Grease. And it was performed at Kingston Mines in Chicago. And it was so successful that people from New York came and decided to move it to New York. A guy was left out of that move, and he was bitter about it for the rest of his life. If you said Grease in his presence, you got an earful. But I just wanted to say he was a fine actor, a wonderful director, and there wouldn't be any Grease if it weren't for Guy Burrill, because it was 5 songs and some sketches. And the other person I wanted to mention was Joe Ostapek, another Chicago actor who I've known for 40 years. He was a wonderful actor and a wonderful human being as well. And he was one of the founding members, along with myself, of the Ray Lonergan Memorial Library in Chicago. Chicago office is the only office that has a library for actors. We didn't have a drama bookshop. And a group of us got together when Ray Lonergan passed away. His family left his library of books. He was a teacher as well as an actor. They left the books to Actors Equity, and we raised money, formed a committee. We got bookshelves, and the Midwest Regional Director, who was Todd Ferguson at that point, welcomed us, and the Equity Office in Chicago has had a library for actors ever since. And Joe was one of the founding members along with myself. And it's a big loss for his friends and for Chicago and for the Chicago theater acting community. So I just wanted to shout out for some Chicago people.
Thank you so much, Iris. Al.
Just a quick thing. Katrina, you're talking about the old man and the Fantastics. And I always think it's like, would you like to see my clippings? And I think we can't do that anymore. Like we're all like, hey, look at my website, but it's no longer the clippings. I wanted to say something. It has already been mentioned, John Herrera, but there's a wonderful story, and this is about community and how we all take care of ourselves. John was the original Neville Landless in The Mystery of Edwin Drood, which started at Shakespeare in the Park at the Delacorte. And over the course of the entire summer run, that was like one show the entire summer, Neville was never chosen as the murderer. There used to be pins, Neville is the devil. I think I still have one. But the entire company went out at the final performance and worked the line. There's always a line for the free tickets, everything. The entire company all afternoon worked the line to tell people, like, I don't care who you want to vote for, you have to vote for him to be the murderer. And he was chosen to be the murderer. And it was always Cleo Lane, Princess Puffer. But there's like, you have to do him, because everyone wanted him to not to be the only person ever chosen. And that's the way we will look out for each other. We do in this business, and it's one of the reasons why I love it so much. Thank you.
That would scare me if I'm like, oh, I'll never be chosen. I don't have to remember that song. Suddenly they choose it. Um, Jonathan Brody, your hand was up.
Yes, it
Yeah.
was. And I lowered it too soon. But anyway, thank you, Al. That was actually why I raised my hand, because I realized I had neglected to tell that story or mention that John had created the role of Neville. I remember even before the last performance, whenever I saw the show, and I didn't know John at the time, but there were people leafleting while you were waiting online saying, "Vote for Neville for murderer." And I don't think he was chosen the night I saw the show. But and I never did find out whether John had a hand in that campaign or not, but it was very amusing. And I also wanted to thank you for mentioning Brett Shuford, because it wasn't until you started talking that I realized, oh my God, I did know him. I worked with him. It was very brief and very crazy. I was hired for 1 week for Amazing Grace on Broadway when someone had and it was a week before they closed, but someone had a contractual uh, week off, and they brought me in. And Brad was the dance captain on the show, and he taught me the show and put me into it. And he was lovely. And what he probably the last thing he wanted to be doing when he knew his show was closing in 2 weeks. But he was really terrific and taught me the show. And he was a very lovely guy, and certainly way too soon taken from us. So thanks.
Thanks. Margaret, you're waving at me. Come on in. Oh, where'd you go?
Sorry, I'm having trouble with my turning my mute on. Anyway, I know two people, uh, Shelley Desai, who was the original Indian Once the Bronx. He did a showcase at the Impossible Ragtime Theater in Manhattan, one of the early showcases. I don't even remember which play, but we were able to put in his bio. The original Indian from Indian Wants the Bronx. That was his claim to fame, and he did a wonderful job in our show. And I'm sorry to hear he's gone. And the other person I wanted to mention was Elda Luisi, an actress who I knew not on stage, but she was the secretary for Pax Christi Metro New York and volunteered a lot of different things. And she was just an amazing woman. And she had a real hard time dying from cancer. And I was just so grateful to see her name there and having her be remembered as an actor, because she certainly was. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. We have 5 minutes left, and I believe this account has to go to someone else at Equity doing something else very important. So, but in those 5 minutes, if anybody would like to say anything else, no pressure. I always like to say these fill me up. You would think sitting around talking about people that have passed might depress you a little bit. And I always leave a little lighter, a little happier. I end up having a better day. I think we actors and stage managers and those around the theater, like we live incredible lives. They ain't easy, but we kind of get to love each other more than the average person because we have to be closer to each other. And I'm really grateful that those of you that to these come to these, and that I get to do this every few months, and that people like James and Al and Maureen and Kim do this with us. Jeff, talk to us.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for this beautiful remembrance. It's funny because I lost a friend, Michael Leslie. I think it was over a year ago, so I thought he'd be spoken of at this meeting. But I'm down in New Orleans right now for the first time in my life I'm the equity deputy in a Shakespeare play down here, and I was inspired to sort of reconnect with equity in general. And I always was taken by the memorials and very inspired by people's stories. Everybody has a story, and I just find it so touching and definitely inspiring. I'm not saddened. I'm lifted by people's love, by people's connection, and people's stories. So thank you very, very much for honoring these wonderful people. And Dee, I think you and I worked at La Jolla Playhouse some years ago. Um, nice to see you. I think I think you might have brought me in on ragtime, like back in the '90s or something like that. So it's good to see you guys.
Two
And thanks again.
ragtimes ago, yes.
Good memory. Weren't you in Toronto at the time?
Wow.
Yeah. Good to see. I have very limited memory, believe me. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. All right. I'm going to wish you all a wonderful day. We will see you in three. Oh, Al, you want to say something real quick?
I'm waving goodbye.
Oh, you're waving. I'm wishing you all a wonderful day. I think, yes, if you have any ideas of what we can do better, you can email me at that email address. And thank you all for being here. And thank you for a wonderful, uplifting time. Go have a great day.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
You too.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Beautiful as always.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.